Welcome everyone back to another episode of Parkinson's Coast to Coast with our host, co-host, my very close friend in this fight toward a cure is Glen. Welcome Glen again, and it's Sharon's son George. Everybody hopefully by now knows Dr. George Ackerman. But from Hawaii to Florida, from really around the world, we're here to advocate for Parkinson's disease awareness worldwide. And my co-host is really doing some inspiring work with the Hawaii Parkinson's Association, which I hold close to my home. And I had the honor to meet with Glenn live and excited to announce again we'll be joining one another in Washington, D.C. with the Michael J. Fox Foundation in September. I represent TogetherForSharon.com in memory of my mother, Sharon, who lost her battle with Parkinson's, but we fight on for all those battling Parkinson today and your families, because no one's ever alone in this fight for a cure. Today's guest is someone, again, really inspiring me daily to never give up in this fight. I'm going to shift over and send the show to Glenn live so he can introduce our incredible guest.
All right, thank you, George. Welcome everybody. We're here with Dr. Michael Braitsch, out of Dallas, Texas. Uh, uh, Mike, can we call you Mike or Dr. Braitsch or
Mike's fine. Some people
Mike's
say
fine?
Dr. Mike. Some people say try their best with Braitsch. Whatever works for you. Great. Yeah.
All right, we'll go with Dr. Mike. That's my eye doctor too. He's also Dr. Mike, so we'll go with that. All right, Dr. Mike, tell us about yourself. How you got started with working with Parkinson's and just what you're up to right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. First of all, I appreciate it. And it's always an honor to get to talk about the work that I get to do. So my training is as a physical therapist. I got my training here in Dallas, Texas at UT Southwestern Medical Center. And my grandmother, long before that, had an atypical form of Parkinson disease, PSP, Parkinsonism, PSP, progressive supranuclear palsy, which, as you probably know, and probably anybody watching the show here probably knows, is something that looks a lot like Parkinson disease, but it doesn't respond very well to medication. And so watching her with her battle really was something that stuck out for me. And, it was a hard thing. So years later, I've done martial arts most of my life. Long before physical therapy, I had a great amateur career as a competitive fighter, and I've always loved and practiced Tai Chi along the way too. So when I was in my physical therapy school training, I remember the head of the movement disorders division at UT Southwestern giving us a lecture on Parkinson disease. Dr. Dewey, he's since retired. His son, also Richard Dewey, is still a movement disorder specialist and really
Actually,
great.
he's right down the block from me. I was there the other day.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's a small world.
Yeah.
Um, Well, I remember at the end of his lecture on Parkinson disease, at the time, there wasn't a lot going on in terms of, rock steady boxing, dance for Parkinson. There just wasn't as much out there. And I remember asking Dr. Dewey, because years before, a hero of mine, a boxing coach named Freddie Roach, who's famous for coaching star fighters like Manny Pacquiao, he'd been in an interview with Sports Illustrated, and he said, gosh, there's something about working with my fighters and the training I do with my fighters that helps me manage my own Parkinson's symptoms. And that stood out to me because, fight training, martial arts is something I was doing a lot of and I was very passionate about. And I've always believed if you've got a unique gift or an area you're excited about and you can use that to help people, well, that's the most winning combo available. So I asked him, hey, what's your take on boxing training and Parkinson's? And he's like, well, we know that exercise helps. We know it's the only thing that slows the progression of symptoms, but why don't you study it and let us know what you find? And I thought, well, that's a wild idea. So far in professional school training, I learned a lot about someday when you are able to be effective and someday when you master these concepts and get your license. But here's some guy who's really well known, really smart guy. Why don't you go study this? And somehow I was able to convince some folks on the faculty to let me do it. We put together a pilot program. The pilot program was so good, we had to throw the data out. And we just worked from there. So we kept getting these small grants from the Parkinson Foundation. And for 5 years, we'd look at different roles or categories that were positively impacted by boxing training for people with Parkinson's. And we published some great work along the way about how boxing training helps not just with planned balance strategies, knowing how to position yourself for a certain task or movement, like a functional reaching activity, but how when you hit the bag and the punching bag gives some force back, that helps with reactive balance, which is kind of like the golden ticket for helping people with Parkinson's disease to work on balance problems. Because a lot of folks, along the way, I opened up a clinic of my own that specialized in helping people with Parkinson's. We grew to 12 group programs a week for several years. And along the way, I got to meet a lot of people who, not all of them, because everybody's a little different, but most of them, if they struggled with balance, the biggest area was with reactive balance. I get nudged. I miss a step. How can I quickly recover my balance? And so being able to do that with boxing training, improve that with boxing training, really is very meaningful. And that opened up a lot of other areas for us to explore. And getting folks in through our research groups then gave us the ability to create community-based exercise programs for them to continue when the study ends. So we ended up starting a Tai Chi program. We started an adaptive yoga group. We do short-term things where I get students from local PT schools and we do like a dance program, or we kind of blended an art expression idea with our boxing program, and we did an art project where we put gloves on and punched a canvas, and that was during the pandemic. So we made this big mural, and we brought everybody in secretly to test their balance and see how they were doing at home. We bring them in 2 at a time, and that was pretty cool. We started a hiking group. We've gotten to do a lot of really cool work. Fast forward to now, unfortunately, I had to close the clinic, but I've still continued, still got some groups online, still got some groups that meet periodically in person. And also here in Dallas, I've been training exercise instructors from DAPS, the Dallas Area Parkinson Society, on how to run a high-intensity, non-contact boxing program. And I'm starting to get some work out there, too, to train people on how to run a Tai Chi for balance and Tai Chi for Parkinson group. So trying to do a lot of things, but having a really good time with it.
Well, I wanted to thank you for all the inspiring work you do with the Parkinson's community worldwide. I know I followed you and shared and support a lot of what you've done, but one important topic we haven't talked a lot about is physical therapy. I think in my mother's journey, it was kind of sad and also important, but the only thing that literally gave her hope was physical therapy. It's like if you have if we had like 100 hours, I would literally just say that one sentence. That was the only thing. She kept saying she wants to be there for her grandkids, weddings and life. And that was it. The only problem is when she kind of, accelerated and progressed the last year, we had to qualify for a special long-term hospice program in Florida. And unfortunately, they don't believe in physical therapy, which I still don't understand. I would understand if it was like a month thing, but this was like a year. And that kind of really, I think, was the end, like the downfall of it. But it was at a point where she couldn't do it. But I just wanted to commend you because I think that not enough people don't talk a lot about physical therapy. I know I've had 4 back surgeries and many injuries, and you kind of think of therapists, you go and you move on after you feel better. But this is something that for people with Parkinson's can go on and help for many years to come. So no question on that. Just thanking you again for bringing important light to this topic. Now I'll send it to Glenn. I don't know if you had some follow-ups.
Yeah, thank you, George. So just want to echo George's comment about physical therapy. It's actually a physical therapist that first alerted me to the fact that I might have Parkinson's. So basically what happened was I was seeing my PCP, and she was saying, oh, I'll send you to the neurologist just to rule things out. But in the meantime, want to do physical therapy for your stiffness in your neck and shoulders and so forth, and just overall movement. And so I went to a PT, and he actually said, I'm not a doctor, this isn't my specialty at all, but he said, you're showing symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And that was my first inclination that I might have Parkinson's. And being 47 years old at the time, nobody thought Parkinson's except for this one PT. So just wanted to share that part. So reading your bio, you said your goal is to empower people with PD to move better and feel better despite their diagnosis. What's the I know everyone's different, as you know, but what's the typical course of exercise action do you recommend for people to do to help them in their journey with Parkinson's?
That's a great question. And for that one, we probably could spend a ton of time. I mean, shoot, a couple years ago, I was in Honolulu and I got to meet with you, Glenn, and see some of the work you were doing. And we chatted for a while. I think the overarching theme, though, when it comes to exercise and moving well despite your diagnosis would be, first, it helps to have a really good coach. Whether that's a personal trainer that has a lot of experience and training specific to people with Parkinson disease, or whether that's a physical therapist, it's good to have somebody who can help design a program. And what should be in that program? Well, starting out, we've had a lot of conversations about this in the past, but starting out, since everybody's so different, really helps to focus on what's something you're going to do. First of all, because you can have the best plan if it's something you don't want to do. Well, that's just going to be frustrating. So I think, we talk a lot in exercise for Parkinson's and in physical therapy for people with Parkinson's about this idea of neuroplasticity, making lasting changes in the brain. And one of the key principles of neuroplasticity is salience matters. So is it something you want to do? I think the other thing is, we've got to make sure it's safe for you. And since I've been so lucky to meet so many incredible people who have totally different preferences or abilities, and most people with Parkinson's not get it a little later in life than you did, Glenn. So that's important too, because a lot of times later in life, people have a lot of different wear and tear issues, or old injuries that are nagging, or things that might impair movement even if they didn't have Parkinson's disease. But we can certainly say, the ACSM has put together some great guidelines. The Parkinson Foundation has broadcast those guidelines to the mainstream. I've done some webinars on that, but the general idea is, no matter where you are now, it's good to work your way up to trying to target 300 minutes per week of physical activity. And from that 300 minutes each week, 150 should be moderate to intense aerobic exercise. And when I say that, there's some room for interpretation, right? Because you could say, well, how do you measure moderate to intense aerobic exercise? A lot of people in the fitness world start simply with a heart rate and using a percentage of like an age-adjusted max heart rate. But I've met plenty of people over the years too who maybe heart rate data is not reliable. Maybe they're on certain medications that cap their heart rate, like beta blockers, or maybe they have some autonomic dysfunction because they're from Parkinson's. So maybe it's harder to get to those target heart rate thresholds, but we could still use like a rating of perceived exertion scale, where it's just a simple 0 to 10 scale. If 0 is bottom level of intensity, like you just woke up from a nap, and 10 out of 10 is maximum intensity. I always say, like you're running from the cops, or like you're running after somebody that robbed you. Trying to get somewhere between like 4 out of 10 and maybe an 8 out of 10 for target intensity level. I think that can make a big difference for folks. So overall, be as active as possible. But then if you can gradually work your way up to doing some amount of aerobics, aiming for that threshold for 150 minutes a week, and then doing some strength training, some flexibility training, and trying to keep things as fun as possible and as functional as possible, that makes a big difference. And that's what I loved about the clinic that I was fortunate to have for 7 years. And since closing the clinic, I'm still preaching the word of how to do this when I teach PT students at Texas Women's University. And I get to interact with students from a lot of other programs too. But here we try to talk about, okay, well, what's the perfect mix for people with Parkinson's? Well, if it's hard to stay active for the general public, and then you add in something that's chronic and progressive that can make it easier to feel anxious or depressed or isolated, well, having groups is a really helpful key to success there. So I think finding some group exercise is a major point of emphasis. And then finding somebody you can do some individual work with. Hopefully it's a physical therapist or a personal trainer that has a lot of Parkinson specific training. I think if you can marry those two, groups with some individual work, things just go much better. I've just seen them go much better than folks who say, well, I'm going to do it on my own. And I think about even, I don't have Parkinson's, but the last year I fought, for example, I had been many years in training with my teacher where I used to live in Ohio, and a great team of people. It was kind of like a family, a martial arts family. Made it easy to show up and train, and it made it easy to challenge myself. I moved to Texas. I was in PT school my last year training. I was doing a lot of my training solo, and it was a bear to get that work done. And then when I got to my last tournament fighting, I was still in great shape, but my timing was off. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that could have been much better if I'd been working regularly with a coach and with a group. And then if you think about, well, that's just for the general public, but how exercise is even more important for people with Parkinson's. If they can find a group, I just think that's the golden ticket, because it's going to be easier to show up. It's going to be easier to work hard. And that community aspect cannot be understated. The value of having a community of people who know what you're going through and can give you some tips or resources or just listen and understand, man, that makes a world of difference.
Thank you. I want to share a few resources, but as I do that, I was wondering if you could touch on, and it might be magic for you in your life, but that moment where kind of see somebody struggling, but they light up, even their face when they see progress is positive being made. And then, I wonder what that, feeling is like for you. And as you also respond, I just want to share tribewellness.org is one of the areas you've been, most associated with. Everyone can also follow everyone at Tribe Wellness on Facebook, Instagram. I will add the notes, and you don't have to, everyone listening doesn't have to note this down. Also, some of the incredible work you've done. Look, this gentleman you might recognize. A nice action shot here, and also all the work you've done with so many other organizations in the Parkinson's community, and we appreciate that. But maybe back to the initial question, if you can touch on, what's that feeling working with someone with Parkinson's and seeing the positive, aspects. We always kind of, unfortunately, I know my case, have to talk about the negative because my mother, lost her battle, but she lives on through all of us and all the work we do. But maybe you could touch on that.
Well, I think to your point, George, in a world where there's so many things that can go wrong, when you see something positive, it's incredible and it's infectious. And when I think about one of the first rounds of the research groups I was doing with UT Southwestern, we had a guy, my buddy Winston, one of the sweetest people on the planet. And when he first started with us, he admitted this to me and to others. He was willing to talk to anybody after this. Winston, when he started with us, was upset, understandably, frustrated, understandably, and grouchier than most people I've met in my life. The first couple workouts, if we're doing a 3-minute round of activity and 1 minute of rest, he'd quit about halfway through. And he taught me a phrase. He's from West Texas. He taught me a phrase called, he'd say, calf rope. And I'd say, I have no idea what we're saying right now. And he'd say, calf rope, it means I quit. And he wanted to quit every single workout. And something happened a couple weeks in where something in him changed. And he became, what he later told me is he started to feel some of that tightness and stiffness that can come with rigidity and that can come with dystonia from Parkinson's. He started to feel some of those symptoms backing off a bit. And he had a moment where he realized, wait a minute, I haven't even really been trying during these workouts. I wonder what would happen if I tried. And from then on, his balance improved, his mobility improved, his strength improved. Probably 6 weeks later, his wife said to me, I have my husband back. That's the man I married. I got to tell you, if that doesn't motivate everybody around this guy to all of a sudden say, gosh, have I been trying as hard as I can? Have I been showing up and putting forth the kind of effort I want to? It just gets so infectious. And this man, he made his last 6 years of his life about spreading awareness for people with Parkinson's. He was very active also in another group here in Dallas that I'm sure you've interacted with often, the Parkinson Voice Project.
Mhm.
And they do speech therapy. They help people around the world with free speak out program resources. And they have a famous phrase, which is speak with intent. Well, my buddy Winston, after having so many improvements from exercise and so many improvements from speak out, he decided, I need to spread the word to people. This man was in his 80s, still had a hair on his head, which is something I'm hopeful for. I don't know if I'll get there. I know a lot of people say, wow, that's a miracle on its own, right? He dyed his hair pink. And we all asked him, Winston, why is your hair pink? And he'd say, well, you know the phrase, speak with intent? We're like, yeah. Well, I'm saying pink with intent. And we're like, what? What does that even mean? And his wife talked to our whole group about it. People would come up to him in public and at the grocery store, at church, and they'd say, what's the deal with the pink hair, man? And he used every one of those opportunities to do what you guys are doing and what I've been trying to do to spread the word about Parkinson disease and to let people know a diagnosis, as we all know, doesn't have to be a death sentence. And if it was somebody who maybe didn't know anybody with Parkinson's, he'd still tell them anyway. If they knew somebody with Parkinson's, he'd give them his number and say, tell them to call me. I'll bring them with me to one of these groups. I mean, it was just absolutely incredible. So then next thing you know, his birthday arrives a few months later. We're all dyeing our hair pink to honor Winston. I mean, it's just all of a sudden where people would normally feel totally alone and look at something that just takes away function and quality of life. And instead you got a group of people dyeing their hair pink, cracking up, telling jokes, working hard. I mean, what more could you want in life? I think it's just wonderful what can happen with Parkinson groups.
Well, I appreciate your time and all that you do, and I'm gonna ask Glenn to send it to him for any final wrap-up questions, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I totally agree with your earlier comments about exercise. What being the most important or the best exercise being something that you'll do every day and you enjoy, because that's what I tell people when I talk to people about Parkinson's, because I get that question all the time. What's the best exercise for Parkinson's? I say, well, I mean, the science says that, you need to get your heart rate up, but in lieu of that, if that's not possible for you, even if it is possible for you, best exercise is something that you'll do every day and that you'll enjoy doing, because that is so key to helping people who are going through apathy, through depression, through other non-motor symptoms with Parkinson's, which I think are the most harmful symptoms of Parkinson's. So yeah, so thank you for that. And then also, you know, I've been working with a lot of people on their core strength and their balance. Primarily, so that's what I've been working on with people now. So, and I think that's been very helpful as well, because we just don't want people to fall as well. Yeah. But yeah, I just want to say, Mike, thank you, Dr. Mike, thank you for all that you do for Parkinson's advocacy, and for spreading the word about exercise. It's helped me tremendously, just from a person with Parkinson's standpoint, and also as a personal trainer working with people with Parkinson's, knowing that I'm on the right track. And so it's been very inspiring here listening to you today, and hope to see you again sometime soon. I think you're coming to Hawaii, right, for the International MDS Conference?
Yeah, I'm trying to find a way to get out there.
Okay.
Last year, I was really lucky. I had an abstract poster from some research on what you just talked about, non-motor symptoms, and how those were improved by group exercise programs. This year, I don't have an abstract to present, so it's a little harder to try to figure out how I can negotiate time out of work, but I'm still trying to make it happen. And I just appreciate the opportunity to come on here. If anybody listening, or anybody either of you run into, needs to find some resources for training on how to run exercise groups, doing more of that now, and I'd love to be helpful there. Or if I can just be useful in any way, let me know.
I'm gonna look into your Tai Chi, because that's something that I've been thinking about trying, because my balance is starting to progress a little bit. So yeah, definitely I want to look into Tai Chi.
Well, yeah, for balance, Tai Chi, I mean, certainly individual PT can tease out what aspects of your balance are most affected, and give you a really custom, individualized program. But beyond that, what's the most researched form of exercise for improving balance? Tai Chi. Historically, what's the most validated by research form of exercise for improving balance? Tai Chi. And since most people have some sort of chronic pain or injury or nagging, whatever, having a form of exercise that's slow and relaxing, that isn't going to flare up a bunch of pain, is usually more appealing. So I think Tai Chi's got a lot of great things going for it. It's a passion of mine personally, but I think clinically, there's just so much value that we can tap into. So yeah, I'd love to help with that.
In South Florida, I had the honor at Florida Atlantic University a few years ago, I went, they had a few programs for people with Parkinson's, and I got to sit in on a Tai Chi in a program, which is, I never even heard of it before. And it's amazing how many things are out there. And that's what the show and all that, we want amazing guests like yourself on it, because I don't think people are aware. And as you both know, that's the biggest, focus, but trouble sometimes is getting the word out. And we wrote recently a book on sports and slowing the progression of Parkinson. But it's important that people know, if you don't like karate or you don't like basketball, there's still a million other sports or other options like physical therapy. To me, physical therapy should be really like a sport, even though I know it's not. I think it should be grouped together because it really can help. But also, like you both said, Tai Chi and also so many others. So this conversation, even though we have to wrap up today, still needs to continue. After the lights, camera, and paparazzi leave the show today, doesn't mean that we have to stop this conversation. I do hope that everyone listening will share it. I also want to thank you, Doctor, for your time, and all the lucky individuals in Texas. I'm in Florida, so we love Texas and this great state there, benefiting from a lot of the work you do. So I hope everyone will visit your website and support all your work. Also want to send again another thanks and love to my co-host Glen, and everyone. Please visit Hawaii Parkinson's Association. I want them to have 1 million likes and views, or I won't rest. And Glen knows I won't. I literally haven't slept in a while. But this show, these things keep me going. I might not have PD, and unfortunately, I lost my mother. But you know, the other day I had to speak to a group. I won't say what name. I'm 6'2", 200 pounds, police officer, and fall apart the second I talk about my mother's journey. So kind of worried in Washington, Glenn, you'll have to carry me after I'm falling apart and crying. But you know, stuff is very important, and just because my mother lost her battle doesn't mean this fight is over, because we still have to help support Glenn and all of you listening and your families, because until there's a cure at everybody's doorsteps around the world, we still have work to do. But it gives me hope knowing that there are doctors like our guest today out there fighting for you. So thanks again, doctor, and thanks, Glenn. This has been another episode of Parkinson's Coast to Coast with your guests. Again, my friend Glenn and Sharon's son George. From Hawaii to Florida, Parkinson's disease awareness has to be worldwide. And I feel, and I believe Glenn will also agree, we have to be a family in this fight towards a cure. So thank you again, everyone, for listening. Thanks our amazing guests too. I'll be have a smile on my face now the rest of the day, thinking of you know, all the work you're doing and so many lives that you're changing for the better. So thank you both, and please stay tuned, everyone. We have more shows to come because we still have work to be done, and we hope to see you there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Aloha.